Welcome to Agile Self-Development, the podcast that gives you a roadmap for personal growth and self-improvement for your body, mind, and spirit. Hi, I'm Helene Kopel, and I'll show you how to become your best self, one version at a time. Many of us have gone through hard times. Trauma or uncertainty about where to go from there can leave us feeling overwhelmed, stressed, anxious, depressed, alone. We're afraid to ask for help, and we end up feeling stuck like it's never going to end. We've got a choice. We can either stay stuck and use the trauma as an excuse, or we can find a way to move through it and begin to heal. The healing journey isn't easy, and it can take years, if not decades. My guest today is Adena Sampson, best-selling author of The Road Back to Me, 9 Principles for Navigating Life's Unexpected Twists and Turns. Her book tells the story of how her world came crashing down and her 12-year journey that had her fighting for her life and the lessons she learned about thriving in the face of adversity. As an inspirational speaker, a singer and songwriter, and a breakthrough coach, Adena helps people bridge the gap between where they are and where they're meant to be, living a happier, healthier, and more empowered life. And now, on with the interview. And Adena Sampson, welcome to the Agile Self-Development Podcast.
Oh, Helene, thank you so much for having me, and I appreciate you and your presence.
Oh, thank you. I'm excited about this. I want to talk about your book. You describe your book, The Road Back to Me, as a roadmap to recovery and healing. So I want to first say thank you, because roadmaps are key components of any Agile process. So you fit right in from the start.
Well, that's great, because normally I can't say that I have.
Oh, there you go. Well, your journey is described in the book. For those who haven't read it, can you give us a synopsis of what your journey has been through to bring you to a place of writing a book about the road back from it?
No, sure, absolutely, Helene. I would say on the most simplest level, truly severe chronic illness being one of them, crucial, like devastating, literally heartbreaking heartbreak, relationships in the midst of that, and then financial devastation. So it's not, once, twice, it's 3 times. Many of us may go through one of these things at any given certain time in our lives. But I went through all 3 and not just once, twice, but 3 times over and all together. So I would say that it's been one hell of a ride is an understatement, really. Blessed on so many levels, and I've been through hell and back. And so I think a lot of times a lot of people have this misunderstanding where they might see somebody and say, wow, I love this person's energy, and wow, she's so positive. And sometimes a lot of times we may project on what we think that person's life may be or has looked like. Mm-hmm. And what I know is I could not have written this book unless I had gone through every single aspect of what it feels like to be in the middle of what life throws at you and how to navigate that. It sounds, sometimes it sounds a lot easier when we speak it. Not always as easy to embody, understand where we've been, our coping mechanisms, our underlying self-sabotaging beliefs, right? And of course, that stemmed from my childhood, as it does for many of us. So I would just say that, the illness and me getting sick was a big start to me understanding a lot more of what was still playing out in my adulthood life that many of us adapt in childhood, to cope, a lot of times for our benefit, that is no longer serving me.
Right.
And so my journey has definitely been one of personal self-development, although it may not have always looked that way with, a lot of what I was going through. And I say this because we're still here in COVID and coming out of maybe where we have been over this last year or so. If people haven't experienced some of these issues in their life, whether that's, again, a death of a loved one, losing a partnership through a divorce, going through chronic illness, financial devastation, I believe they have or they are. Again, we're all in the same boat. And I wrote this book because it wasn't so much of me as it was coming through me. I had to do this. It took a lot of courage and vulnerability to share where it is I've been so that other people know that they're not alone. And that's really, I think, the basis of what's led me here. I know that's long-winded, but...
No. And I completely relate for me, I also have, it's a lot of vulnerability to share your story when it's not as beautiful as people may perceive from the outside, just looking at a smiling picture of you,
Absolutely.
right? For me, I have shared some of my story in previous episodes, but I don't have a natural comfort. There's a lot of vulnerability that I risk, and so I totally get that. And I want to take it from there to say, one of the hats you wear is a breakthrough coach. And in the book, we talk about breakthroughs as well. I believe you had your own breakthrough. So, from other episodes that I like to dump things down to the very basic level. So for you, what constitutes a breakthrough for somebody, and how do you help people get to that?
Sure. So a big thing that I've learned, and a lot, part of what I'm using right now a lot as my tagline is the only way out is through.
Mm-hmm.
Period. The only way out is through. So I call myself a breakthrough coach. Again, I'm not big on labels per se, because that's what I've truly done in my life. And that's what I believe I help people do, is break through their limiting beliefs, right? Break through their trauma, where they've been. Again, a lot of us have been told this lie that we're not good enough. Okay. We hear this a lot,
Mm-hmm.
even though a lot of it for us can be very, very subtle, depending on your personality. You might not readily see it right away. I think a lot of times when we are met with adversity and what life throws at us, so many of us, and this cookies back to what you just said about not being 100% comfortable yet, right? With that vulnerability,
Mm-hmm.
is that I think a lot of us look for, number one, certainty, right? It's innate within us as human beings to want things to be stable, want to know what's going to happen next. And in doing so, that hinders us a lot, because life doesn't work that way. We have no control. And that's just the truth. We may think we have control, but we don't. So in order to break through some of these limiting beliefs, in order to have the life that we say that we want, we can't be pointing fingers outside ourselves, right? And how does this relate to adversity? Well, again, depending on whatever life throws at you, you have to be willing to be uncomfortable.
Right.
To go through the uncomfortability, right? The only way out is through, to break through that uncomfortable place,
Mm-hmm.
which none of us want to do. Let's be honest. There's that feeling of going, okay, whatever that is for you, this is uncomfortable. I don't like this. And I'd rather go around the obstacle, or maybe avoid the obstacle.
Right. Can I fast forward to the end?
Exactly.
Yeah. Can I fast forward to
Can
when
I
I'm
go
better?
from A to Z, like now?
Yeah.
And that's something is always
Yeah.
what happened to me. So for me, I think it's really just saying breakthroughs, like miracles, to me, are not something that, it's not like something's just parting the seas, right? Oh my God, there's a miracle. To me, miracles happen every day. Although it's a matter of shifting our perspective enough to see them, to understand that the small things are big things, that having an aha moment, an awareness, even being courageous enough to be in that vulnerability when we're taught otherwise, can lead to a huge breakthrough. So to me, it's a matter of how are we measuring success.
Mm.
It's what we think success is, which I can't say is the truth as to what it is we've been taught and told in the outside world, what success is, what we deem success to be.
And it's
That's
different
false, right?
and it's different for different people. I spoke with somebody that was, I see, how do you define this is, I'm going to make a stereotypical statement. I asked somebody how they defined success, and it was financial freedom. And I got it. But I felt like, being 30 years older than the person, I was like, at some point you're going, or close to it, you're going to recognize that success is not just about your financial status. It's relationships. You can be successful in so many other ways. It's your own pride in what you do, to
Sure.
right? To what do you feel about yourself? For me and my personal vision, success would mean that I'm at peace with my body. That's just one of the elements. That would be success for me. So there's a lot of different ways to describe that success and shoot for it. And any of those big aha moments, however it gets us back on a path, I think fits, like you're saying.
Yeah, again, I think success can be defined in so many ways, although, and it might look different for many people, sure. I think success in its own, like I said, is so much more. And you're right. We do need to, I think, open up our minds a bit to understand it's far more than financial freedom. Freedom in itself. Okay, what does that look like? Well, we don't know what that looks like if we are not questioning what we're taught, what we're told. Is it true? Does it serve me now? And who am I willing to be? Am I willing to look in the mirror and say, am I being part of the solution? Or can I be honest and say, how am I playing a part in this? You know what I mean? Am I part of the problem? Being able to acknowledge and be responsible as to how we show up in our lives without beating ourselves up. There's so many facets here. But I think in society specifically, we really are taught, I think, that success means something outside of ourselves or reaching a certain status. And I think that it depends. If you're sick, let's just take an example of where I was, for example, for so many years, fighting for my life for 12 years.
Mm-hmm.
And again, understatement. Success may mean that I was able to get out of bed. I was able to make a sandwich that day. And that's all the energy that I have for the day.
Mm.
So it's really all perspective, isn't it? Because depending on what life throws your way or where you're at, you have to kind of reevaluate, especially when you're a type A personality and you're driven and you've got goals and we want to achieve things. What is really important in that moment? When I had to redefine success so that I could be okay moment to moment, live in the moment, and understand that success was not measured by, again, what it is I did and my status, which I had a huge, I would say not a problem, but that was a big thing for me when I was younger. I almost remember the exact time that shifted for me. Gosh, it must have been at least almost 13 years ago. And this was before close to the 2008 recession, when I had, like many others, lost my whole business. Things came, falling down, and I had gotten sick. So it was kind of a domino effect.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt that I was watching the world go by and watching everyone else rebuild or achieve. And I couldn't, because of, being held back at the time, is what I thought, from what it is I was feeling and where I was. And I was on the island of Maui at that time, ended up selling flowers. I knew nothing about selling flowers. Ended up driving to the other side of the island, an hour or more every day, and probably about 4 days a week. Slept most of the day because, again, I had no other choice. I mean, I was just a mess. And I'd lost a relationship. So again, it was, okay, she's getting sick. The relationship was already not well. And then the business is down. What do I do? And I was judging myself thinking, my God, look what I'm doing. Where am I? How could I? Right. And it was this moment where I remember being in Lahaina, and I had this happen a few times where people would come up to me and go, wow, you're my favorite flower girl. Wow. Somebody said, your smile just made my day. And it was in that moment, Helene, that I realized that, okay, if you're telling me my smile can make someone's day, okay, and again, irrelevant of our beliefs, I respect everybody's religious beliefs, whether that's the universe, higher self, or God. But I knew in that moment that if just a smile could make someone's day, then I was already doing God's will. I was already doing God's work. I was already here on purpose, even when I didn't feel like it. And that was a huge aha breakthrough moment for me. Sounds kind of small, right? And yet so big, because that was in that moment where I said, okay, I really got to shift my mindset as to how I am, deeming what is successful. How do I reevaluate this and shift my perspective, which is why number one of my first principles in the book is shift your perspective, because it was one of the most important ones for me.
Yeah. And, even back in the day, one of the favorite stories I have from all the books I've read is I believe it was Stephen Covey's 7 Habits. He talked about a paradigm shift, about a man who's on a train and these kids are going crazy. And he's thinking, like, why doesn't the father just tell him to sit down and shut up? He's all annoyed. And then finally the father says to this man, I'm so sorry. I hope the kids aren't annoying you. We just left the hospital. Their mother died. And suddenly, I get chills whenever I think about that story. What a paradigm shift from these annoying kids to compassion.
Which I hate to say, we tend to lack.
Yeah.
No, we don't. And that's a great story. It's been told time and time again for a reason, because it's a real experience. And how often are we in a rush and in a, how do we say this? Come on. We've been in a society that is instant gratification. Go, 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 do. Mm-hmm. And because of that, even our technology, Even though it's brought us closer, it has also divided us and separated us because, again, it's easy to judge, right? It's easy to be in traffic. And how many times are you in traffic where somebody is, for no reason, is always in a rush to get somewhere, and somehow they're better than everyone else. They have to get there faster, And again, this lack of understanding that you never know what somebody's going through, what their day's been like.
Absolutely. I just came from the store. I'm with my brother. We get a few things at Walmart. We go into the line and there's someone checking out in the 20 items or less that has much more than 20. So he's like, see, this is my pet peeve. Like, this is my pet peeve. And she's got more than 20. And I'm thinking, like, first of all, they're going to hear you. Don't be rude, But I said to him, I go, maybe she wasn't taking anybody. Nobody was in line. And she told this elderly woman to just come into her line. I have a different point of view, right? And sure enough, the woman behind the register said to us, I'm really sorry about it. You can let the woman know behind you that it's 20 if you wouldn't mind that it's 20 and under, but I had nobody in line, so I told her to come. I'm like, see, I've always got the positive thinking, but we make assumptions, right? There's another big story we talk about, 4 agreements, right? Don't make assumptions. But let's get back to you.
Well, let me just tag on that. We don't have control as to what happens in our lives. We said that, right? Which is exactly what we showed up to be. And positive or not, that's always great to think that way. But we do have a response. We do have a responsibility as to how we react or respond. Mm-hmm. And does it really matter if she has 20 or not? Meaning, yes, we would all like to follow the rules. And I've always been kind of that way, in some way, shape, or form. However, even in that moment, we're judging the moment as to what, when, where, how, and maybe that we're in a rush too, because, why is that happening? Meaning, it's all relative. And I think it's because most of us lack self-compassion. So in order to have compassion for someone else, most of the time, we have to have it for ourselves. And we don't, because we're not taught that. We're taught that it's selfish to self-care, self-love. And there's a fine line between being selfish and self-care, right? And again, I think a lot of the times everybody is so quick to judge and point the finger because they haven't owned their shadow self within them, right? Like you hear a lot of the times, okay, wow, being angry is a bad thing. Mm-hmm. Well, I disagree. I don't think being angry is a bad thing. It's how we're judging it. Now, it's depending on maybe how we use that and how we take that out. But being angry, our emotions are a very good thing because they're guidance. It's our guidance system. It's a post that we can say, okay, where are we? Why am I feeling this way? And give us another ability to almost places within ourselves, because once we do, the peace that you were speaking about, it becomes such a natural part of us because there's no judgment, not towards yourself and not towards anyone else. And that's where the compassion is starting with accepting those things within you first. And then I'm telling you, it's amazing how the rest of the world shows up and what you're able to then deal with, how life throws things at you. You respond differently and you see things differently. And your life truly does become a reflection of the peace and the non-judgment and the compassion that you are giving to yourself. I know it's much easier said than done, but I think it is key. It's one of the biggest things that we need to start practicing.
Yeah. And I think it starts with a sense of self-awareness that a lot of people lack. And you talked earlier about showing up as yourself. I saw on your website or in your book, you talk about authenticity, right? Showing up authentically. And that there's a self-awareness in that. What is truly, who are you? What is showing up authentically? I'll leave that for you.
Sure. And again, that's at the root of most of what I teach as well. Because again, I start even my book off with an introduction that talks about we pass down more than just our hereditary traits, right? We pass down actually our behavioral traits, our beliefs from generation to generation, aside from society, school, teachers, what we learn, what we see on billboards, that pretty much, even if you've been in sales for a long time, the truth of what sales, really is, okay, here's what you need, here's why you need it, and pretty much you don't have it and we do. Okay, I mean, for the most part. Now, I see nothing wrong with sales because life is sales, just like I believe life is relationships, meaning I don't believe that financial gain or financial abundance is separate than who we are personally. The more you work on yourself, unless it's been, let's just say, aside from the only thing I could think of is if it was been passed down to the family financially, okay, or having a nest egg, that would be the only, I think, caveat. as you work on yourself and you know who it is you are, no, not only do you have stronger relationships and build that foundation of trust within yourself and then the people around you, but of course your finances grow from there. Your relationship with money, because of who it is you are and the belief in yourself, grows too. So authenticity is key, but we are not taught that because we are taught and told that, again, on the underlying that we do not belong, we are not good enough. And I'm not saying everybody, but for the most part, I would say quite a few people learn this conscious, it's an unconscious thing, right? That even our parents, my parents both came from broken homes. Okay, I even talk about my family lineage and how we have survival in my family lineage. Okay, I wouldn't even be here if my grandmother hadn't survived the Holocaust. Her whole family was gassed and gone, and she survived because of her voice. I say that because my grandfather drove a tank in the army, British Army. He actually liberated the camp at Bergen-Belsen. And I tell that story in the beginning to say, look, my family, my parents did the best they could from where they came.
Right.
And then I did the best I could with where I've come from, meaning it's not our fault. However, just because it's not our fault and it is passed down doesn't mean that we don't have responsibility to say, hey, who am I being? Most of us wear many masks. We play many roles, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because this is what we've been taught and told. Because again, this is inauthentic because we want to be accepted. Okay. We believe that if we do this, we'll be loved. Because again, this is kind of how we were taught in our relationships, what we saw growing up, not necessarily understanding that when we're younger and we're sponges, right? When we're kids. So how do we get back to being authentic? I have a whole chapter. I talk about embracing your vulnerability, which is the big, like you said in the beginning, that you have a hard time.
Oh,
That is like, for me, that's the number one space because we have to be okay going, this is who I really am. We're not so much, what we're doing is we're clearing away the stuff that isn't us to make room for the person that we were meant to be, meaning we were born in magnificence. We were born with innocence. We were born in this light. And then we were covered up with all these falsities as we picked it up along the way. You know, between 0 and 7, I know you know this, you know, we, everything that we learn normally comes from our parents, and whatever that is, irrelevant, right? We then take on. And so because of that, I feel like most of the work you do is a more of a clearing of what's not you,
right?
What's not in alignment with the truth of who you are. And if you get an understanding of, again, the courage it takes to get an understanding of who it is you are and realize that most of us don't want to do it because we're afraid we're going to lose the people we love. We're going to be judged. Nobody's going to like us for who it is we really are. And we're afraid of that. When we can work on breaking through that, okay, and really facing our fears and realizing that what we want is on the other side of that, what we say we truly want. Like there's no quick fix, there's no pill. And I tell people that because I don't think transformation is that. And anybody who tells you otherwise, again, I'm not going to, say anybody else is wrong.
What I say more on the show is Rome was not built in a day, and neither are we. So people do want that quick help. And I've had a lot of coaches on my show, and they want to get coached in an 8-week program. You're going to get great insights. You may make some great movement, but life is a journey, and self-improvement, self-development, personal growth is a journey. You're not going to be done in 8 weeks. You may be done with your program to learn from this specific coach.
Yep.
But this should be, well, I don't know if should is the right word, right? We say we should all over ourselves, but we want to continue that path of growing. And I want to come back to something you said in your book, which is suffering serves a purpose, right? So when we're in the heat of the suffering, we can't imagine what that purpose is. And we can't imagine, getting out of it, yet there is a journey out. So will you share what that purpose is? Why do we have to suffer? How does it help us?
Well, I don't know if I can say why we have to, if that's even my...
I realize like have to might not be the right
No, but that's great. That's great. Because here's the thing is that one of my favorite quotes is, life isn't about waiting for the storm to pass. It's about learning how to dance in the rain.
It's on my wall.
See, there you go. Me too. And I think it's because some of us, when it resonates so strongly, it's because that's how our life has been. When we've realized that we've needed to find peace amidst the storm, which again can sound almost impossible, especially when you're suffering. And again, I'm not sitting here speaking from having a PhD. I'm speaking from experience of understanding what it's like to suffer on such a deep level, that if I can do anything to save anybody even a little bit of extra suffering, which again, I can't promise, I can only say that whatever your journey is, it's your journey. But I'm inviting people to come along for the ride. I'm inviting people to be on the journey with me and saying, look, this is where I've been, so I understand you. I'm still there. I'm not going to pretend, no matter whether I'm a coach or not, that somehow I'm above that, because the journey, I believe, doesn't end, right? We're always looking for this destination and we want to get there. Patience is definitely a virtue, and I definitely wasn't born with that. So for me,
me neither. Amen. Yeah.
that's an ongoing process. So, to say that, that we must suffer, I don't think I'll speak from that place, but I will say that the same thing when we talk about uncertainty. Life is what happens to us, as far as, because life is life, we have no control, but we do have control of what we believe, what we think, and how we respond to it. And when we understand that, and when we start to practice that, everything does shift. Now, it's a lot harder when you're in that state of suffering, because it's harder in a lower vibration and frequency. We have a tendency to get stuck in a cyclical pattern. And until we can get out of that and break that, we are still stuck in a cyclical pattern. And what I've done in the book is, I wanted to say, look, I'm not saying that we're talking about anything necessarily brand new here, or that I'm trying to reinvent the wheel. I'm trying to say, this is where I've been, what has helped me, and how can I break it down into bite-sized pieces where it's a daily practice. So circling back to what you said, that again, it's not overnight. We have to have patience. Yes, we can do a 12-week coaching program, which is what I'm group coaching online through the book. Yes. But again, I make it clear that once you start the journey, it's a commitment to you to invest in yourself, and realizing that that's just the first 12 weeks. Even just the book before the course, you've already started your journey. Now you're on it. Let's celebrate the fact that it's a matter of practicing and putting these principles into place in your daily life. What happens 90 days from now? What happens 6 months from now? What happens next year? You will be amazed that your life, when you stop and think about it and look back, will actually be shifting as we speak in front of your eyes, not because you're just being positive, not because you just took a 12-week course,
right,
but because you're committed to you, your growth. You've got people around you, a community that are on the road with you, so you know you're not alone, and you're seeing transformation happen in your life. And you will, if you're committed. It's just, like I said, you can't expect that just to happen overnight. And I think, again, that's shifting our perspective, managing our expectations. And in doing so, again, it's amazing how things happen. So I believe that we suffer because we're here to learn. I really believe that the only purpose, and my purpose as to why it is I'm here, is to serve and to learn. Everything is a lesson, every moment. Even when you talk about familial issues or any issue that you might, let's just say you think somebody is 95% wrong. You've got whatever circumstance you're dealing with, whether it's family or friends or business, and you can't quite see or get around this uncomfortable situation because, normally if you're a part of it or what it is you're doing. Well, I can tell you that you still are. There's still that 5%. So it's our job just to go, okay, so what is my lesson here? It may not be, a lot of times we say that we attract what it is we put out. Yes. However, it doesn't always look the exact way. Like if you're being a certain way, all of a sudden you're attracting somebody that is acting a certain way. It's not always your job to fix that or make that right, or think that somehow we're taking the burden for the fact that, we're growing and doing everyone else's work. That's been my issue on my journey. Is I've done the opposite, where I am so
trying to do it for other people.
Yes, trying to overgive, do it for other people when it's not my job. It takes two to tango. So in every situation, we get to see what is being reflected. We're all mirrors of each other. What can I learn from this? What can I learn from this person, this situation? Is there a cycle here? Am I repeating this in my life, not just in my romantic relationships? How's it showing up, the same issue, in a business setting? Because I'm telling you right now, you will absolutely start to see it the moment you shift your perspective and take your power back, reclaiming your power. That was also a big one for me. Number 5 in my principles. A lot of times we give away our power without even realizing it, because for some of us, like I said, it is so subtle. that we don't see that
Yeah.
it's easier, isn't it, to not take responsibility, because then again, we don't have to worry about things changing. We don't have to worry about losing people in our lives or people we love. But the only way to have the life we say that we want, attain our goals, to be happier, healthier, wealthier, whatever that is to make those shifts, to learn those lessons, and to clear away and let people go that no longer serve you. Sometimes, again, it's not even, you're not supposed to hold on so tightly. We're supposed to let that go so that the new and improved can show up, because you are now new and improved, because you have committed to your growth and you are seeing those shifts and changes in your life by practicing daily. So,
Well, there was another principle in your book that caught my attention: surrender and accept what is. So, what does that look like?
so surrender and accept what is. It sounds just as it sounds. And I think a lot of us have a misunderstanding of what surrender means because of its context in war, right? And what it means to surrender is to, in essence, I think people believe that maybe it's a giving up. And actually, I disagree wholeheartedly, because I believe it actually is a pillar of strength.
Absolutely.
It actually shows us that we are able to surrender and accept what is in the moment, whatever life throws at us. For example, COVID. None of us expected the pandemic to happen. And if they did, or doctors did, we weren't aware of it. The point is, we have all been affected in some way, shape, or form. Unexpectedly, right? It's uncertain. It just happened. And we've had to pivot. We've had to navigate. And at times, in order to get through, in order to cope, we've had to accept what is. Otherwise, we've sat here in a state of overwhelm. We've sat here in a state of anxiety, depression. I mean, let's be honest. We've had a huge uptake in, I guess, what we call mental illness. Again, I'm not big on labeling for a reason, because I believe that mental illness should not be a stigma. It's something that most of us deal with.
Absolutely.
And maybe we should learn to accept that again, and talk about what we've all been through this year, how it's affected ourselves, our loved ones, those that we've lost. Okay, again, our businesses, it's in multiple facets. And how do we surrender and accept what is when our whole life is falling down around us? And the realness of the hurt and the anxiety and is really, I would say, horrific. There's no, you can't sit there and play that down. How do you have a calm within the storm, right? Peace amidst the storm. It's because you've got to surrender in the moment. Not saying that you're giving up. You're saying, okay, this is how it is. Can I change this?
Right. There is a basic context of surrender that is very familiar in spiritual circles.
Yep.
Right. Spiritual programs talk about surrender and let go. And I'm not talking necessarily religious. 12 steps, very much about that, and a lot of the personal growth, right? But what, to somebody who is not into that, let's say, or not familiar, or they're just entering this personal growth world, what does surrender mean in that context? What does that look like? For me, it's, I see it as, I'm not fighting to change something that I have no control over. And we fight in our heads. And surrendering and accepting is stopping the fight and understanding this is the way it is right now, but doesn't mean it's the way it's always going to have to be.
Exactly.
I don't know if you have any other views around that.
Sure, you've hit it on the money. In order to have peace within, we have to make peace within ourselves, which comes from our mindset, what we're thinking, what we're believing at any given moment. So again, it's a resistance is what you're saying. We are resisting what is. I really support being a bridge, okay? Accepting our own humanness, being a bridge. Again, I've studied a lot when it comes to spirituality and a lot of what we hear in the New Age community. But you're right, to bring it down to its basics is that, look, we cannot change what's happening in the moment. This doesn't mean that it's happening forever. It's just what's happening now in this moment, which leads us back to why it's so important to be in the present moment. You hear that all the time. But what does that mean? It means not thinking too far ahead of ourselves, because when we do, we get overwhelmed. We get anxious. We're in fear. It means not getting stuck in the past of what just happened or what just took place, because then we're depressed. There's so much of what we get caught into. Right now, here in this moment is all we have, not just a second ago, not what's going to happen next, but right here in the moment. That's a practice in itself. And surrendering to what is literally letting go of that resistance of wanting to fight, wanting to change it, like you said. And for those of us who are kind of used to doing that, that's not, again, it's not always, easy to do. It's important
Mm-hmm.
to really just stop and go, okay, for today. And even for me, it's not even for today. I break it down in the
Right.
book that it's literally moment to moment. It's not day to day, it's moment to moment. That we have a choice in every moment and that we can reset in any moment. So COVID's here.
Right.
We can sit here and fight it. We can sit here and do many things which we all have experienced, let's be honest. But how have you found in the moments of how you've gotten through this last year, for example, Helene, what has made it easier for you to get through the moments? I'm assuming when you think about that, you will actually realize that it's because you're able to surrender to what is happening in the moment and realizing that it's such a bigger, it's so above and
Mm-hmm.
beyond what, we feel like it's so out of our hands because in some way it is. But
Right.
then when you bring it down to the smallest piece of who it is you are, how you're showing up and what it is you're doing to create that ripple effect, then it makes it much easier to surrender and accept what is in the moment, realize it's not forever, it's just for now. If everything
Right.
happens for a reason, what am I to learn from this? And how can I use this as an opportunity? How can I use this time as an opportunity? I know so many people that have had some of the best, this last year has been the best year of their life.
Very lucky people. Very lucky people. It's been a difficult year for many. Some people love being home. Like I always wanted to work from home. There's the bright side. You speak of 23 qualities of a spiritual warrior. So, if we can you tell us what is a spiritual warrior?
Sure. I think a lot of us are spiritual warriors and we may not even be aware of it. So again, it's not something that I believe is outside of ourselves. I believe it's within each and every one of us. We have an unbreakable spirit within each and every one of us, which I call your spiritual warrior, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we just need to tap into that. We need to understand what that is for us. And I think that there's some qualities that make up, a spiritual warrior. One, a spiritual warrior is they're self-aware, right? Spiritual warrior is self-aware, number one. They challenge their own beliefs. They're willing to question. They're curious, right? They're willing to say, is this the truth? They're willing to face their fears. Okay. They're willing to also lead by example. It's not what you do. Okay. We're not human doings. You've heard this before. We're human beings. It's not what you do.
Yep.
It's who we are.
Mm-hmm.
Again, your authenticity. It's who you are. It's not what you do. It's not a job you show up at. Our identity is not placed outside ourselves into these places and spaces, right, that we define as successful. A spiritual warrior uses adversity to their advantage as their compass. They understand that if the only way out is through, then whenever it is happening, there's got to be a reason, there's got to be a lesson. And so when we surrender to that in the moment, irrelevant of how it may look, again, we're able to open up these opportunities and grow in ways that are amazing.
Mm-hmm.
It's also about resiliency. And I'll get to that in a second, because a spiritual warrior recognizes the gap between their head and their hearts, and they seek to bridge that gap daily. A lot of times our mind just gets in the way. Okay, and a lot of times we haven't bridged that gap between our heart and our head. A lot of times we're told not even to listen to our heart and just go with what we think. That gets us into trouble. It really does.
And vice versa too. We hear a lot like, my heart told me to do this.
Huh?
Use your brain too, right? My heart told me to go back to the love of my life who abuses me. Right? So you gotta, yes. So at some point you go, oh, my heart has been a little making some bad judgments lately. Let's use both of those things.
Yep, and how important that is when you realize, you're right, that a lot of us who have come from, dynamics that are dysfunctional, dynamics that, again, even codependency, that we may not even been, again, another label I don't like, but I have to use because I want to try to relate to everybody, and realizing that we all have something we may go to either numb out, right, to cope because of what we've learned when we were younger. And it's not good, bad, or indifferent. It just is, again, accepting what is and then going, okay, what am I going to do with it now? And is this really serving? So a spiritual warrior is just willing to do whatever it takes. And again, like I said, it's about resilience. It's about adaptability, which is what your show is about, right? It's about, adapting to what life throws at us. Yep. And then the art of resilience, what does that look like? Again, the only way out is through. A lot of us think and believe that we're born with confidence, or some people just have it and they don't, or some people are lucky and they're not. No. Again, that's a farce. What is the truth? The truth is finding grace under pressure in order to be able to navigate the uncertainty that life throws at us and move through the obstacles, not around them. Okay. There's a proverb that states that obstacles are the path. And that's what I believe. Because all of what I've been through and the suffering I've been through and every obstacle that I've been through, okay, in my relationships, with my health, when I was fighting for my life for 12 years straight, when people thought I was out of my mind and making it up, the PTSD that came with that, it wasn't just physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, you name it. Okay, is realizing that the only way out is through, is that you're being wielded. Okay, it's like taking metal that melts under fire. How do we wield something, out of glass or out of metal to make a sword or to make something that ends up being strong, right? That our base and our, of who it is we are and how we show up is strong. It's because I've been through that. It's because I know what that's like, that when COVID hit, it's not that it didn't hit me any harder, but I'm one of those people that can tell you I've had one of the best years of my life. And it's because it's all relative.
Yes.
When I was fighting for my life for the last 12 years, long before COVID, with cytokine storm, understanding what COVID long haulers have been through and hoping now we can support them. So those of us who have been through deemed mystery illness or, illnesses that people don't readily, or the medical industry has yet to readily understand. I thought I missed my boat. Until COVID came along and realized this is why I came. This is why so many of us came. Wait a second. Shift in my perspective. I'm supposed to write a book? Huh? What? You would think that maybe I planned this.
My podcast came out of it.
Yeah. You would think I planned this. No. It was, you must do this because now you've got to tell people where you've been so they're not alone in a time where people desperately need to know they're not alone, where they might be going through what we kind of call a dark night of a soul, something where you just believe that maybe you don't want to be here anymore. Let's talk about some real reality of the humanness of what life throws at you and how sometimes it can be dark. Well, I'm hoping that you don't do that this book will show you that if I'm still standing, okay, which is no small feat, that you can too. And I don't say that lightly or from a place of, oh, you can too. No, I really mean it.
Yeah, I relate. I'm a 2-time cancer survivor. 1994 was like my first year from hell, right? I had cancer at 24 years old, shortly after getting married, then dealt with going back in for another surgery, and then got pregnant thinking that if we don't do it now, I may not be able to, but ended up with an ectopic pregnancy that nearly killed me, right? Relatively speaking, pandemic is nothing. I'm sitting quiet, I'm sitting quietly at home. Right. But it's isolating but it's also relative to where I was, at the time last year. It's painful to be alone, but I know I can survive. And people went through like, what if we get COVID, and for me, I was more, and a 2-time cancer survivor. 10 years after that, I lost half a lung for a recurrence. And I just was like, what do I do next? What do I need to do to move on? That's my thing, is keep going. But I also came about with a sense of I can survive. My frame of reference, and yours too probably, is I can survive this. And I know going through COVID, my thought, here's my pet peeve about people like, I don't need to wear a mask. Everybody's so worried about themselves. First of all, the accepting what is. When the grocery store says you have to wear a mask, how could you protest when they also say no shoes, no socks, no service? Why aren't you saying I am coming in and protesting by not wearing socks and shoes? My frame of reference is I can survive. And for me, wearing a mask was not about me staying healthy. It was about me not killing anybody else.
Thank you.
I know I am resilient, but not everybody is. And I was so worried that I could kill somebody inadvertently. And I want to tell you about where we are right now in the state of affairs from a statistical standpoint. Other than my first episode that explains what Agile self-development is, my number one listened to episode is WTF is resilience. So we all know
That's a big part of like, I think you and I have a similar reflection. And first of all, I just want to thank you for sharing your story with me, because this is, I went to your website, I've studied some of what you said, but I didn't know that. Okay. And yes, you are a survivor, but you're more than that. And I can see that from who it is you are, how you're showing up, because you're taking your story, you're taking where you've been, and you're serving others with it. You're saying, this happened to me because if it hadn't, I wouldn't be here serving you now. You understand that it's part of the plan.
Right.
You understand that it's purposeful. Now, it didn't feel that way when you were going through it initially. No, of course not. But here you are, and here's what you're doing because of that. So I just want to commend you for that, because yes, you are a spiritual warrior. And it's one thing because you understand the art of resilience, which is a big part of, like I said, what I speak about in my book, to let people know that they have it within them, that they just need to tap into some of these qualities to understand what resilience is and have the courage, which you do, which I do, to step up and move through something irrelevant of the circumstances. Now, to cookie back around to, which I don't want to, and I won't get political in any way, shape, or form. However, I 100% agree with you. And this also goes back to what I feel that we have a false belief on. It is very different to be in your ego and to be self-serving and selfish, okay? And then be able to have compassion and self-love and self-care. I go into that big time in my book for a reason, because I felt that it's important to address this issue. Because for a long time, even, when I started my journey, when you're around people and family and things that maybe are not quite there, sometimes you get actually projected upon as that you are being selfish. Because for the first time, you're putting up your boundaries. You're realizing that you had no boundaries, that this is why you're codependent, right? You've realized that the courage it takes to put up boundaries is one thing, because you know that the people around you are not going to like it. The moment you start to rock the boat in a dynamic where you've been placed your whole life and you do something that is true to who you are and is authentic, you are bound to maybe meet up with the energies of those around you that are not happy with that. And we have to be willing to do that in order to gain the respect that we deserve. Is it more important to not be authentic and go along with it because you feel that people are loving you? Or is it better to be authentic and be respected in your life and have people around you that actually love and care about you? And that starts from self-love, self-compassion, putting up your boundaries. But wearing a mask, as far as I'm concerned, has nothing to do with anything except for being selfish. Meaning, I do the same thing. I wear a mask. It's not for me, because I've been where you've been, Helene. I fought for my life for the last 12 years. Right? I've had chronic Lyme disease, which the CDC still doesn't fully recognize. Now, again, I've got nothing against the CDC, and I've got nothing against Western medicine and some of the amazing technologies that we have that we need and use, to our disposal. However, my journey, I was having to be that anomaly to all the doctors, right? My journey was that I had to seek elsewhere and alternative therapies and people thinking outside the box, because, again, some of us are the forerunners, COVID long haulers or not. The same thing. We are the forerunners to what inflammation is, what our immunity is, how our immune system is reacting to these cytokine storms, the brain inflammation, right? All these things that you hear about now. I'm not saying I'm so happy COVID happened. No, but I am saying, hey, it may have taken a pandemic for us to really look at this, but now we've got to look at it. Now we're looking into a space and place where so many people have suffered for so long, didn't get the attention, the care, and the understanding they need. And maybe as a community now, as a global community and consciousness, we can look into that in a way that can support us moving forward as a whole. But wearing a mask or not wearing a mask, as far as I'm concerned, especially coming from somebody who's always considered to be a rebel, somebody who wants to be heard, somebody who does speak out, okay? As you can see, I'm not passionate at all. Very well be in that situation, but I don't believe politics has anything to do with me wearing a mask, because I am being courteous to those around me, knowing how it is to have fought for my life.
Before we get to the speed round, I want to ask you quickly, what type of people do you work with? What are the programs available? Best way to reach out and find out how to work with you?
Sure. I'll answer that in a few different ways. Just adenasampson.com, my website, is the best way to get your information that you need. I work right now mainly, I work with many different people, but mainly with those who have gone through crisis, who are currently going through crisis, okay? Anybody that is going through a divorce, that's a great example, okay? Anybody that's lost a loved one, maybe even somebody that might be an empty nester, Okay. And somebody's gone off to, college for the first time and they're not quite sure who they are and what to do with who they are because they're so used to giving and serving others. It's men and women. I definitely have a good mix. So, for me, it's not one or the other. It's just, I work with people they're at a place where they know something is kind of just not quite right. They know that they feel that they deserve more. They feel like their life should maybe look a certain way, even though I'm not big on saying should. This is the truth of how we feel in those moments.
Right.
And they're realizing, hey, I know that there's a way this can shift. I know that I've got to be able to do some of the work. I'm ready to invest in myself. And I'm ready to work with a coach, a breakthrough coach that can help me maybe point out some of these things I may not see, maybe help me have that self-compassion, that understanding when I do see that without beating myself up, still take the responsibility, right? Reclaim my power and truly be able, like I said, to have these better relationships in their life, the trust within their authenticity of who it is they are, then bleeds out into all their relationships, right? Personal and business. So, I guess my biggest asset right now is starting with the book and the audiobook that is actually just launched yesterday, one version on Audible. That's going to be kind of rolling out here over the next couple of weeks, like on all the major, retail options. So you can always Google it, The Road Back to Me, 9 Principles for Navigating Life's Unexpected Twists and Turns. A lot of times people know us maybe in a certain point in our lives, right?
Mm-hmm.
Before maybe some people knew you before you dealt with cancer, right?
Yep.
And then people who know you afterwards and where you're at. And you know that you're still Helene. You know that you've grown,
Right.
you know that you've learned this. But a lot of times people have a hard time. They put you into a box. This is who you are. This is where you're at. But I'm sure the person who you were before and after, may have been two different people at the time, but who you were showing up and how you are is still Helene. It's a big part of who you are. You're not hiding both. So, a big part of what saved my life during my illness, I could not do the sales, the coaching, the speaking. I could not do that because it had affected my cognitive ability. And so I was able to then do music, which was a big part of my coping mechanisms and outlet growing up. Something that I've done, many years prior, and something that I didn't realize literally I needed to come. It literally saved my life. Okay, it was the only time I wasn't in pain was those few hours I was performing on stage here in Las Vegas. And so what I did with this book is I didn't just make it, okay, this is a reading experience. This is an overall experience. This is a full journey. And I use the music in the story section, okay, the first half of my book, to get people to really experience what it is I've gone through, only to relate it to their life so they know that I'm that raw, real experience. And then at the end, I've got the theme song, The Road Back to Me, which really celebrates the fact that you've read the book, that you're taking this journey, and that you might want to come along and do some group coaching or something else, or maybe not, and that's your prerogative. But I open that up, and I have for my readers specifically a soundtrack linked to the book itself that you're able to get once you purchase the book.
Oh, great. And we'll have these links. We'll have the links available in the show notes.
Great.
Awesome.
So, yeah.
So are you ready for the speed round?
Okay, let's do it.
All right. Last board game you played.
Oh, boy. Last board game. Okay, so that doesn't constitute no, that's not a board game. Okay.
Were you going to say Jenga?
But that's not a board game.
No.
But
I'll accept it.
I played was Jenga and then Family Feud, but neither one of those are board games.
Oh, you know what? But it's not a web-based game, right? So you're not using your phone. You're playing it in real life. I'll take it.
Okay, sweet.
Favorite smell?
Oh, favorite smell. I should know this. Coconut.
Mm-hmm. Most famous person you ever met in real life?
The most famous person I ever met in real life. Okay, I shook hands with David Bowie at my graduation, and that was pretty amazing. I got a picture. Yeah, it's just a wonderful person. So, yeah.
Legend. Oldest article of clothing you own?
Ooh, I'm probably going to have to say that's oldest articles because, I'm kind of one of those people that like at night or when I'm at my house is kind of wearing that shirt that's holy, that's literally holy. Like, it's so nice and thin and like I like that. Yes. So I would have to say, I don't know if I have one article. I think I have quite a few. And that being mainly those thin shirts that might have a few holes in them.
Last question. And it's favorite song lyric. And would you sing it for us?
Oh my. Oh, geez, this is supposed to be a quick thing. Favorite.
On the spot. I didn't even think about it, and I just realized, I was like, she sings. Let's get it.
Well, okay. This is okay. I don't know why this just came to me, so we're gonna do it. Okay, and this is because I don't even know if I don't normally have favorites, but Jewel came to mind, and this was many years ago, long time back. One of her songs where she went, "Well, excuse me, think I'm mistaking you for somebody else, somebody who gave a damn, somebody a little more like myself."
Beautiful.
It's very passionate, and I like that because she's in that moment of standing up for herself. She's in that space of saying, "Hey, I'm realizing something here. These dynamics aren't the best, and I'm authentic.
Yes.
I'm caring. Why is my reflection otherwise?" And she's speaking up for herself, right? So,
Yeah. And one of my favorites these days is that song from The Greatest Showman, This Is Me.
oh, that's amazing,
Oh, I think I cry every
amazing.
time. Yeah, I
Because
am not
again,
like
you
a
listen
music
to that,
upset. Like I
just
have
it's
friends
like it's
that it's
moving.
like a
So you're the
religion.
type of person
Music
that
is a
you
religion
hear
to
them.
them. Anyway, Adena, this was awesome. I hope you had a good time doing this. I appreciate you coming on and talking about all this stuff with me. And I will have everything in the show notes. And I can't wait I'm going to get your book on Audible. I'm waiting for the Audible version.
Oh, it's out. So it's out as of yesterday. You can go ahead and
It is. I thought I saw it on Amazon. Yeah. And I'll have that link also.
And by the way, just thank you again for your presence. I say this a lot because presence to me is one of my 4 pillars of poise. And it's key. I think that's one thing that we lack. And me just being, you inviting me on the show, spending time with me, and actually just speaking off the cuff authentically like this, I think is the best way. So thank you, Helene, for just having me on the show. It's a pleasure.
And that was Adena Sampson. And we are going to hear Adena sing her song, The Road Back, to take us out. Join the conversation at Agile Self-Development on Facebook and Instagram. Oh yeah, Twitter too. And LinkedIn. Thank you for joining me. Visit agileselfdevelopment.com and subscribe to the podcast so you can receive new episodes right when they're released. And if you enjoyed the podcast, I'd love it if you'd leave a review in Apple Podcasts. It makes a big difference in how the podcasts are ranked. Thank you again for joining me, Helene Kopel, for this episode of Agile Self-Development. Become your best self, one version at a time. Catch you soon.
Roll back to me. Searching for the answers, also it seems, picking up the pieces of my shattered dreams, putting together the puzzle of who I'm meant to be, yeah. One step at a time on the road back to me. It's time to move forward and leave the past behind. Open up my heart and give my mind, expanding my horizons, looking deep inside, paint a new picture I can no longer hide, breaking the chains that bind me, my spirit set free, far and wide on the road back to me. Road back to me. I'm on the road back to me. I'm on the